the Standing Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item is the adoption of the minutes of this committee's meeting of March 22nd, and the recommendation is to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
The first report of staff is the 2009 final trimester report. We have an introduction by Mr. Peter Steblin, the City Manager, followed by a presentation by Mr. John Dumont, Deputy City Manager, and Ms. Sonia Santarosa, Manager of Corporate Planning. The staff recommendation is to receive the report for information.
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Reamer. We'll have Mr. Steblin.
Before I turn it over to John and Sonia, I just want to make a couple of high-level overview comments. 2009, from my perspective, was a very good year. I'd just like to highlight two things, and they're both included in the report, and we'll go through them in a bit more detail. But the first issue gives a little bit of a report card on the priorities we set for the year and how we met them. As you can see from the report, the staff and the entire community did very well in terms of making really significant progress on all the A, B, and C priorities. And there's a lot of detail in the report on that. But the issue I'd like to really highlight is how this organization very effectively dealt with the financial challenges that we were faced with this year. As Council will recall, that 2009 was a very, very difficult year for all municipalities. And many municipalities created a lot of angst in their community when those economic challenges hit. And municipalities were generally affected in two ways, because interest rates really dropped, and interest revenues, which municipalities fund a good proportion of their budgets from, also drop, which creates a revenue shortfall. And the other issue was that development revenues also dropped. And those two things, earlier in 2009, we thought that would potentially have created a hole in our budget and under capitalizing of those revenues of from $4 to $5 million. And this organization, instead of laying people off, doing all sorts of different kinds of things, basically with Council's approval, set about to manage the situation while trying to continue giving services to this community in the best way possible. I'm very pleased to say that that approach has succeeded, and in fact we've been able to deliver a surplus this last year of around $1 million on the operating budget side, and that's because we set about a target of addressing the drop in revenues through a variety of strategies, and the economy improved later in the year. Development revenues picked up, and we also got a few unexpected wins along the way as well. So we turned what was a very significant potential deficit into a surplus from this year, and I'm actually very proud of all the staff, all the GMs who really pulled together and made that happen. So with those overview comments, I'll just turn it over to John and Sonia for more detail.
Thank you very much. I just have some very brief comments. As the City Manager alluded to, the setting of our business plan priorities has been very successful over the last couple of years. One of the feedbacks we've received from Council, though, in the last 2 years is how do we measure our success, and can we come up with some performance indicators? And so that's a new aspect for this year in terms of reporting out on the final trimester report for 2009. We put together a series of performance indicators to give us a snapshot of how we're actually doing in terms of actual measurements. And I would just like to acknowledge and thank all the staff, because it's been a real group effort pulling together all the data and putting it into chart format so that you can look at it and quickly get a sense for how we're doing. And special thanks to Sonia, our Manager of Corporate Planning, because she's the one that's led the coordination of all this. And she's just going to briefly walk through what we're doing now in terms of performance indicators and our trimester report.
Okay. I will just highlight some of the key performance measures. We had 49 business plan priorities identified in 2009. And this year in 2010, we have about 35, so we've condensed a few. As I've noted in past presentations, we've prioritized the categories into A, B, and C. So the A priorities are those that the administration and council feel are most important and will focus on. And the B ones are those that should be resolved but may be deferred. And the C issues are important, but they're not ranked in either of the top priority categories. So in your report in attachment A, you'll notice that we've sort of color-coded each of the business plan priorities to indicate whether or not we've achieved that goal. The green, if it's colored in green, it means that it's the business plan priority was achieved from a timeline and a budget perspective. If it's yellow, it means that the priority was somewhat on track, but required some attention. And if it's red, and you'll notice that there are no red priorities, that the priority was not on track. So overall, we achieved 90% of the business plan priorities that council and staff identified in 2009. With respect to performance measures, we identified a number of different measures based on each of the 5 strategic goals. And each of these performance measures and the goals are all linked back to a business plan priority. And the first page of attachment B provides that linkage for you so you can see the connection across the strategic goal to the business plan priority to the performance measure as well. And I'm just going to highlight some of the different performance measures from each of the 5 goals. And I'll just touch on 2 or 3 per category. So the first goal under the strategic plan is to strengthen neighborhoods, and we identified 14 different measures. And with respect to quality of life, it continues to be at high levels. In 2009, it was at 98%, according to our Ipsos Reid survey, and in 2008, it was 95%. So there's a slight increase with quality of life perception from the residents that were polled. With respect to public safety, we looked at a number of different measures, and the person, property, and drug crimes continue to drop in the 3 areas. There was a slight increase in traffic crimes. Again, levels of satisfaction with police services has increased. In 2009, it was at 90%, whereas in 2006, it was at 82%. So that's a rather significant increase. With respect to the cold, wet weather program as well, there was an increased number of participants from 2009 to 2008 as well. So that's demonstrating the success of that particular program. The second goal is to expand local jobs and local prosperity, and we identified 6 particular measures. With that, in terms of the number of residents that are living and working in Coquitlam, it remained the same from 2008 to 2009 at 28%. However, those that are working in neighboring municipalities, that number has actually increased from 40% in 2008 to 44% in 2009. So that's demonstrating an increase in local jobs, that not necessarily in our particular community, but in the neighboring municipalities. And in terms of business licenses, the renewed number has remained somewhat static from 2008 and 2009, but there has been an increase in new business licenses that were issued in 2009. The third goal is to increase active participation and creativity, and we identified 9 measures in that particular category. And this afternoon, Councillor Robinson mentioned that we only added 1.8 kilometres of bike lanes last year. However, I'd like to add that since 2004, we've added 15 kilometres of bike lanes, and it's projected that we'll add an additional 13 kilometres over the next 4 years as well. So there's a move in the right direction. Our sports field use has increased as well from 2008. It's now at 89%. As well, we've seen an increase in our registered program hours, our online registrations, our total admissions to all of our leisure and parks programs. And most importantly, based on our Ipsos Reid survey, the average weekly number of times that a citizen will engage in moderate exercise increased from 3.9 in 2008 to 4.5 times in 2009. Our fourth goal, to enhance sustainability of city services and infrastructure, we had identified 5 different measures. Our garbage diversion rate, or the percent that we're actually recycling, and this includes recyclables, yard waste that's dropped off and or put out at the curb, that's increased from 52% to 54% in 2009. Our garbage disposal rate's going down as well. It was at 56% in 2007, and it's gone down to 46% in 2009. And this is a total solid waste that's being put out to the landfill. So that means there's less garbage going out to our landfill. Our energy consumption levels are down 7% from 2009, and this was outlined in more detail in a report this afternoon to the Engineering Committee. As well as our GHG emission reductions, we're at 39% of our target for 2015. So it's approximately 890 tons of emissions that we've reduced over the last few years. And our final goal is to achieve excellence in city governance, and we've identified 8 measures for that. Our value for our tax dollars, according to our Ipsos Reid survey, that satisfaction rating is remaining pretty constant at 86%. It was 85% in 2008. The overall satisfaction with services, it's increased about 3% to 95% in 2009. And our absentee rates and turnover rates and our vacancy rates, those are all decreasing. Those are all going in the right direction. So we're demonstrating, again, that we're moving in the right direction to achieve excellence in city governance. And as John mentioned previously, the plan is we'll continue to report out on the business plan priorities on a trimester basis. You should be getting a report on the 2010 business plan priorities sometime in June, but we will be reporting out on the performance measures on an annual basis. It's just a number of statistics that it works, it's a bit easier to compile annual stats versus trimester stats. So we'll be providing this sort of a complete formal report to you sometime in 2011. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you very much. We'll start with Councillor Robinson.
Be still my heart. I've got performance measures. I was so tickled to see these. This is exactly what I wanted. So I applaud you, Sonia, and to the rest of the staff who, I know how hard it is. I've had to do it myself, but for me as a decision maker, it just gives me that much more information so that I have the confidence to know that we're moving in the right direction, that we ought to be putting more energy into this and less energy into that. I can think back in 20 years ago, we used to have family life education programs in the social service sector that was educating the public about all these, how to have a happy marriage kinds of stuff. And we kept doing them, and the numbers were going down, but we kept doing them. And I remember going to another organization and asking, well, why are we doing these? The numbers are going down. They said, because we've always done them. And to me, that was sort of like, but that's not a good enough reason to do it. And canceled the program, and we saved, I think, $40,000 a year. So for a nonprofit, that was a lot of money. So for me, this makes my job a whole lot easier. I know it's added a whole level of complexity to yours. I do have one measure that I struggle with, but I understand why it's in there, and that's the pop to cop or cop to pop, whatever that is. I don't know how useful that is, but it's in there with lots of other measures, so it's fine. But I think it's one that can distract people. They think that if we compare it to other municipalities and we don't have the same number of police officers to population, that somehow we're going to have higher crime. But I don't know that there's really a good rationale for that measure. And but otherwise, I was thrilled to see it. And I also was, I think it was great to see the year-end net variance in terms of the general fund and getting a really clear picture of how well certainly the GMs did. And I applaud you because I know it was a tough year. And, we have, I hope that we'll be able to, it'll be easier next year because we've already started. And thank you very much for putting this together. I think it shows good accountability, and I'm pleased to see it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the police officer, and also the caseloads, but there was no figure on caseloads and how many. What's the per capita as far as how many police officers to how many residents there is in this city? I'd like to have that if I can.
Well, go ahead.
The information is in attachment B, the officer to population ratio. I believe it's one. Just find
855.
that. 855.
855. Okay.
Yeah.
What about the caseloads?
Caseload, it's 65. In 2008, it was 71. In 2009, it's 65.
How much?
65 in 2009. So the caseload per officer has gone down.
So caseloads are, as a matter of fact, quite a bit down.
Yeah.
Okay, very, very good. Okay, now to the financing. We have Sheena there. Okay, Sheena. The one question I'd like to have is, a matter of fact, a couple of things answered to me. I noticed that, we have constantly, at the end of December, had 48 vacancies, representing 6.25. What is our payroll in the city? A total gross payroll?
Our total gross payroll is approximately $70 million in our 2010 budget.
70 million? Mm-hmm. Okay, so 6% of that would be 4-point-some-odd million, right?
420,000, 6%?
Yeah, be 4 million, so about 4 million. Okay,
Yeah.
so, that's a saving of $4 million that we didn't spend as far as salaries are concerned.
Can
Now, these are the things that, we're talking about, having a surplus in a budget. We've handled the surpluses in vacancies. That's where it is, all is.
Actually, it's in more than that. That savings is distributed over a number of funds, including sewer and water. But we took a number of initiatives this year in terms of trying to solve the potential deficit that was looming. One of them was, as you highlight, Councillor Sikora, was what we called vacancy management. We actually encouraged all the GMs to actually, if they had positions vacant, to think very carefully before they move to fill them, to slow down. And so we actually encouraged everybody to sort of run a little bit lean on a temporary basis and just delay hiring. And then so that delay in hiring, and now some of them are being hired, actually really helped in terms of solve our financial problem. But we did some other things too. We did some things with reserves, and we did some deferral of some road paving and a variety of other issues as well that involved non-salary issues, which we can get into if you like. But there was a wide variety of initiatives that we took, but vacancy management was one of the significant ones. You're right.
Yeah, I noticed that also that you had a low of 7% and a high of 11% in vacancies. So, that's a big saving. That's a huge saving. So, when you say you get 1 point some odd million dollars in surplus, that is very, very light compared to what you save on labor costs. And even if nothing happens in the whole year, and you have a 5% vacancy rate throughout the year, constantly, every year. Doesn't matter what year. You can go back 30 years ago. It's 5% on a yearly basis. And what bothers me is very, very simple, that these things we never used to put in the budget, 5% vacancy rate, because there was never such a thing that we had that 5% vacancy, because 5% vacancy means $3.5 million surplus. So, we pass it on to the taxpayers rather than taxing them if you're going to have a 5% vacancy rate. So what we're playing is a numbers game, and those numbers don't add up too good. Go ahead.
One of the things to consider here is that although there are a number of positions that are vacant, approximately 30% of them are backfilled. So what happens is a number of these positions where a permanent person is not in the position, we still do need to have somebody sitting at that desk answering the telephone and following up. So about 30% of them, we actually have a temporary person sitting there, so they are being paid. So there's no actual cash savings as a result of a good portion of those vacancies.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. But see, we're starting to play numbers game again. We're bouncing numbers around. The fact is that every year there's a 5% vacancy rate, period. There's nobody sitting at some desk. It's a vacancy rate, period. Because of sickness, because of probably holidays, a few other things. So it's 5%. It's a $3.5 million saving. But in here, also, out of 48 vacancies, you only filled 16 of them on a temporary basis. See? So then there's 32 vacancies that were not filled. And 32 vacancies, if you take them at, at $50,000 all in, it's still over 1 point some odd million dollars. It's almost 2% on your taxes. So those are the things that constantly, the last few years, have been coming up in these council chambers that I have very great difficulty with being able to swallow that and have the high taxes that we have today. That the residents are complaining about our high taxes, high sewer, high waste collection, and many, many other things. And yet, these are the things that are happening. And it should not be happening. So I'm just saying exactly what it should be. Not everybody has to side with me on this one, but it's a fact. That, even in your own words, it says that out of 48, there's only 16 of them been backfilled on a temporary basis. So that means that there was 32 vacancy through, and let's take it for a full year, it's over $1 million, $1.1 million, $1.2 million in savings. So That should be passed on to the taxpayers.
If I could just respond to that.
Go ahead.
I mean, I specifically asked all the GMs to run short this year. That always, there was historic vacancies for a different reason, but they backfilled them more. They actually added staff over complement in other areas to complement that. During this last year, we squeezed that down and we eliminated a lot of that. And I personally asked all the GMs to actually run short this year because of the potential revenue shortfall. We were very fortunate that the revenue shortfall was less than we thought. We wanted to be conservative because we didn't want to bring you a deficit at the end of the year. What our commitment to you during the year was that we would take whatever steps we needed to bring forward a balanced budget at the end of the year. We were very fortunate that development revenues recovered, and we also had some actuarial adjustments that actually were to the positive, not the negative, that enabled us to bring forward that surplus. I am very proud of the team that they actually do run conservatively, because I think it makes our city run better, and our taxpayers are in a better situation when we bring back surpluses at the end of the year rather than deficits. So, and I don't want the GMs to stop doing that. And so, those would just be some of the comments that I would make.
It may be good for people that are getting a high salary here in the city and pension plans and everything else, but there's the people that are out there that are on fixed income that can't afford our taxes. They can't afford a whole lot of things. See, and the fact is that I tell you, I made a mistake. My mistake was that I should have brought the papers from my home, which I have. Last year was 80 vacancies were not filled. So no, there was nothing magically happening, because there was 80 positions that were not filled last year, and you can look it up yourself. I've got the paper in a report from the treasurer. 80 positions were not filled. So these are constantly that are happening in this city, and that should not be the case. We should not be trying to get a surplus budget on the backs of positions that are not filled, and that's what we're doing. So there's nothing magic about something running very efficiently, and it probably isn't running very efficiently, but I look at these figures, and here's the figures right in front of me, and I guess these figures either lie or they don't lie. And I take them as factual, and it tells me the story of what's happening here in the city. So we can carry on. But that's, to me, I don't think that that's the way I would want to see the finances run of this city, on the backs of the poor residents that are on fixed income and haven't got the money. Thank you.
And I'll make a couple of comments myself, because on behalf of City Council, I want to acknowledge the tremendous work that staff did this year at Council's request. Council asked you and made it very clear that we wanted to try to find a way to manage looking back a year ago, the numbers didn't look like this. The numbers looked, as many enterprises were facing the same kinds of concerns, our revenues were going to be way down, and we had to manage our way through that. And I want to acknowledge staff, because they did a lot of hard work to manage their way through that. I personally have spoken with a great many of our employees. Many of them had taken on extra duties or were backfilling at that particular time into another position, resulting from vacancies, because we were managing those vacancies. And I certainly do appreciate that effort from all of our staff, because running short means that you're doing extra duties because the work still had to get done. Managing our way through the revenue shortfall that we had predicted a year ago was difficult, and I acknowledge on behalf of Council all of staff for their efforts in doing that. Any other comments? Councillor Segura, do you have something else you want to add?
Yes, I do. Either, Mayor, you either agree with these figures or you don't agree with these figures. These figures, if you take them for face value, which I hope you do.
Yes, I'm not going to call.
Okay, then between you and me, that's exactly what the saving is, on the backs of people that were never hired in this city. And you got to agree with me on that. You can't say that I'm somehow wrong when I'm reading the staff report.
I just said that we managed our vacancies so as to manage through a shortfall in revenue. That was
so you believe in these figures?
Of course, I would never question their financial staff.
What I'm saying is a fact. that we haven't hired staff, so that's where the savings are. Am I right?
That was a significant part of how we dealt with the drop in revenues this year. It wasn't the only initiative that we took, but it was a significant part.
But if you go 4 years back, it was the same then. It's the same now. It's the same next year.
Actually, there were different problems. They always show up as a vacancy list because we cannot, there's always some vacancies. But a couple of years ago, it was that the labor market itself was so hot, we had difficulty attracting really good people. But there was another aspect to that. Because there was such a large vacancy a couple of years ago, in a variety of areas, temporary staff had been approved over complement, which created a different kind of structural deficit that we had to manage our way through. I'm very pleased to say that we've reduced most of that throughout the whole city, and that puts us in much better stead moving forward. We still do have a bit of a structural deficit, nowhere near as bad as it looked last year, but we do still have a structural deficit of about $1 million. We are very comfortable managing it in the same way we managed it this last year, and we'll still do a bit of vacancy management, not anywhere near as much as we had to do last year. But I do still always anticipate some vacancies to occur because of the very nature of when a vacancy happens, it takes you a number of months to fill it, and so any snapshot you make always shows up some vacancies, and that's just part of the business.
Well, there's nothing, magic about this whole thing. The fact is, there's the vacancy rates, and we save money in vacancy rates. And they're very, very simple. So there's nothing magic about it, okay? Just straightforward, Mayor.
No, I agree. Staff did more work this year with less people. I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, that should have been fewer people. My grammar slipped for a moment. Any other comments or questions on that? The motion is to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 3 is a report of the City Clerk, and it concerns the Joint Family Court Youth Justice Committee. The staff recommendation is that the committee receive this report for information.
Motion to receive, moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Reid. Go ahead, Councillor Reid.
We had apparently a request from the committee to add on extra meetings. Which meeting did it come out of? February or March?
I'll ask for Councillor Reamer's microphone to be turned on. So she was at the meeting, I assume. Councillor Reamer. Microphone.
Councillor Reid, you are asking when we first started talking about this, about adding the extra meeting?
Well, I don't see a motion from the committee asking for...
We actually first started talking about it, if I recall correctly, in December, and I believe there is something in here that indicates January. The minutes you've actually got are February and March. So that would have transpired prior to these minutes here.
So the committee actually made a request?
Yes, the committee decided that we needed to hold more meetings.
Well, as long as there's something from the committee asking.
Oh, yes. Yes, it came from the committee, yeah.
I didn't see anything, so.
Okay. Anything else? No, we're good. Okay, so the motion is to receive the report for information. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4, there's a series of minutes to be approved by this, or to be received by this committee. Item 4 is the minutes of the Joint Family Court and Youth Justice Committee meeting held Thursday, February 25th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
5 is the minutes of the Joint Family Court and Youth Justice Committee meeting held Thursday, March 25th. The recommendations to receive those minutes.
Motion to receive by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is minutes of the Parcel Tax Review Panel's meeting held Wednesday, April 7th, and the recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Asmunsen, second by Councillor Reamer. The incredibly riveting minutes of the Parcel Task Review. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Extremely well chaired by Councillor Asmunsen. The 3-minute meeting, I believe. Okay.
That is the final item on this evening's agenda.
Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn by Councillor Reid, I believe, and second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you all.